In this module, we are going to learn how to code, test and deploy your Azure functions locally, that is by using the CLI, command prompt, terminal or your favorite integrated development environments like Visual Studio Code. I am here in the official documentation page by Microsoft, that is how to develop and debug the functions code locally and then publish to Azure. In our previous module, we had seen how to develop, test and deploy our Azure functions with the help of Azure portal itself. But many of the developers prefer working with their favorite IDE or the code editor or the development tools of their choice, that is to create, build, test, debug and then publish your functions to the Azure. Now Microsoft has provided following options which you can leverage in order to write the code for functions, test, debug and publish code to functions app in the Azure. Now coming to the IDE, currently the supported IDEs are the Visual Studio Code. The languages supported over here is the C#, JavaScript, PowerShell and the Python. So you can make use of this extension in the Visual Studio Code, that is to build, test, debug and publish your functions locally with the help of Visual Studio Code IDE and then publish the same to the Azure. Next is the command prompt, that is if you are using Windows operating system, you can make use of this command prompt or the PowerShell options or the terminal on your Mac OS or the Linux operating systems in order to develop the function in those supported languages. If you are making use of command prompt or terminal in order to build the function, you need to install the Azure Functions code tools before starting developing the functions with the help of those options. Another option is Visual Studio. If you are making use of C# language in order to code your functions app, then you can make use of the Visual Studio. Here also you need to have the functions tool installed, that is the extension for your Visual Studio, same like the Visual Studio Code. Then is the Maven environment, that is the runtime engine if you are making use of Java as your preferred programming language, that is to code function. Now there are few files which will be created automatically if you are creating your functions app locally, like the functions.settings.json file. So it will be used in order to store the settings and the configuration details which will be used for local development tools, that is for testing, debugging, for those purpose. So these settings will be specific to your local computer or a machine where you are trying to build your functions, and it will not be pushed to the Azure. Now you can see what and all settings it will support over here in the table. If you are developing your functions locally, so any settings which are available in your local settings.json file, it should be present in your Azure app as well before publishing the functions code to the Azure. Automatically you can publish the settings available in local settings.json file as well using the commands which we will see shortly while we discuss how to develop the functions app using the code to development options. Now coming to the trigger and build, there is an option how you can declare those with the help of the file. So this is the documentation which briefly discuss about how you can develop and debug the functions locally, how you can publish, that is by using the IDEs and the terminal, that is by making use of Azure Functions code tool. So without wasting much time, let's begin with our hands-on and see how we can develop our functions app with the help of the command prompt, as I am making use of Windows operating system. Similar thing you can follow in the terminal as well, as this is not specific to any operating system, as Microsoft has made these Azure Functions code tools available across the operating systems. Now let's see how to build the functions app with this option. In this class, we are going to learn how to develop and build the function locally with the help of this command prompt or terminal option. We will click on this code tools development over here and see how to do the same. So as I told in my previous class, we need to install this Azure Functions code tools in our runtime or in the operating system which we are using. So we can make use of the command prompt or the PowerShell in order to install this Azure Functions code tools, and we can develop the functions code locally. Now we'll see what are the prerequisites for the same. We need to have the CLI. We can make use of the Azure CLI PowerShell on the cloud, or we can make use of our terminal or the command prompt in our Windows or Linux operating systems. And then we need to install the extensions. So at the time of recording this class, version 4.x is the latest Azure Functions code tools available which we can make use in order to build the functions. Now coming to the installation steps, how to install the Azure Functions code tools, we can make use of this command, that is npm install -g Azure. So this is making use of this npm command. So in order to use the npm commands, you need to have the latest Node.js installed on your computer. Now in order to install the Node.js, you can go for this Node.js over here, go to the download section. Now based on the operating system which you are using, Mac OS, Windows or any Linux operating system, you can select your operating system and download the installable file. So you can click on this and install the Node.js on your computer. Same thing you can verify with the help of command prompt or terminal on your operating system. So let me use over here the PowerShell. Just right click on this It's not necessary you run as an administrator. I'm running this as an administrator. We can verify once you install what is the latest Node.js version you are using. Currently 20.3.0 is the latest version and this 18.16.0 is the stable version of this. Now once you install this Node.js, let's install the Azure function over here. Let me just exit from here. Suppose if you are not comfortable using the PowerShell, another option is you can make use of this Visual Studio Code. Go to the terminal, click on this new terminal, and you can select under which source or directory or the workspace you want to work. I will select randomly this one workspace where I will be working. Here also you can verify what is the node version you are using. It will be same. So you can make use of PowerShell command prompt or the Visual Studio Code as well. I will make use of the PowerShell. First thing in our functions development using the CLI is to install the Azure Functions core tool. Version 4 is the latest version at the time of recording this class. So by the time you watch this class, version might be upgraded to 5 or 6. So accordingly, the command will be provided over here by Microsoft. Let me just copy this from here, go to PowerShell and enter. So this is going to take some time in order to install all the resources and the dependencies for Azure Functions core tools. So we will pause this class for some time until all the necessary dependencies are installed for this Azure Functions core tools, and we'll resume once all the installations are completed. So once Azure Function core tools are installed completely with this npm command, we will get something like this, the message. Now let's go back to the documentation. There are some commands which like the init, start, new, so and so forth things, the commands which we can use in order to develop the functions locally, test, debug and push to the Azure. Now let's see what are the functions available. You can just write func and enter. It will list all the functions available or the commands available. So func start, if we use, we can launch our function or deploy our function locally so that we can test. Will run on the port 7071 default. If you want to explicitly change this, then you can make use of this attribute like the -- port, and we can mention the port. If you use the func new, it will create a new function with a template. You can make use of the preferred language and the function name, template, file name, so and so forth things, and the authentication level for your function. Func init is used in order to create the new functions app in the current folder where you are running those commands. And the function logs is used in order to get the logs for your functions app. First of all, let me just navigate where I want to create the functions app. So we can just verify with the help of this pwd. Now it will list the directory where you are currently running. Let me just clear this. In order to create a function app, as we had seen, there is this init command. Let me just copy, and you can provide the functions app name with which you want to create the functions app directory. Let me just paste this command over here. The next it will ask to select the runtime. So I will select the node runtime as I am going to make use of the JavaScript as the language in order to code all the functions within this functions app. It has been successfully created the functions app, so we can verify with the help of Explorer. It has created so many files. There is this func ignore, so we can mention the file names over here which we want to ignore at the time of publishing this local functions app to the Azure. Also there is the host.json. Here we can mention the configurations related to all the functions within this function app. Local settings.json is explicitly for your local development purpose. You can have settings specific to the local computer or the app. Those are the few files it will create. In detail is provided over here what file is for what purpose. Now if we scroll down, we have successfully created the functions app, but we have not created the function. Now let me just scroll down and see what is the code we have to use in order to create the function. Now we have to create the function with the help of function new. It will create a function within your function app which you have created. If you want to explicitly mention the trigger based on which it will be triggered or the name of the function, you can mention like this, or else you can just run this func new and the prompt it will ask the options. Let me copy this func new from here. Let me go to this CLI. So here under, if we give the ls command, it will list all the folders which it has created. So my functions project is the function app which it has created. We need to get into this folder first of all. Get into this. Now we'll see what are the folders available. So it is having few configuration files. Now we have to paste here the function new. It will ask what will be the trigger for this. So I am going to select HTTP trigger like we had seen in the previous module. Here it will ask for the name. If you want to provide the name, you can provide. I am clicking on enter, going with the default name. Now let me just see the file structure. It has created this HTTP trigger folder. Let me just get into this. Let me see what kind of files it has created. So index.json is the main file which will carry our code for the function, and functions.json will carry the binding details, input, output, as well as the trigger details like we had seen in our previous module. Now let me just come out of this. Let me just clear those. Now we have created the functions app. We have created the function which gets triggered with the HTTP request. Now how we can test our functions locally is with this command func start. Let me just copy this. and paste it over here. Click on enter. So it is starting our functions. It has started our function in the port 7071 as we had seen in the documentation earlier. Let me just copy this from here, open the browser and provide the link over here and click on enter. Now if I show you the functions code, let me just go onto this functions HTTP trigger and let me open this with a notepad or something. Here our function will return this message, that is what we are seeing, this HTTP trigger function executed successfully but name has not been passed. So it is because this function is specifically checking for the name in the query parameter or within the body. If we send the name, then it is saying hello, the name what we provided and this message. If the name has not been sent, this is the generic message it is sending with the status 200. Now let's provide the name in the query parameter. Now with the help of browser, we provide the query parameter like this. Sorry, the name is our query parameter. We will send beenum and click on enter. As you can see, we are getting a message hello, the name what we sent over here in the query parameter, that is name, the name is beenum, hello beenum, and the message like how we have written in the code. So this is how we can create a functions app locally, how we can create a function within a functions app, as well as how we can trigger or test or debug our functions code locally in our computer. And the last part remaining is how to deploy our functions app to the Azure. So if you look at this documentation, you need to scroll down towards the end and come to the section that is published to Azure. So we need to run this command, this is function Azure function app publish. So before publishing this, you have to make sure you have this Azure CLI installed on your computer. If you are on the Windows operating system, just click on this download latest release of the Azure CLI. It will download. Then you can log into your Azure. If you want to get the help, just click on the sign in and see how to log in into your Azure by using the AZ login command. It will use the username and the password prompt, so you can populate the same. Now let's come back to this deploying files to the Azure. We need to copy this from here, go to the PowerShell. Just make sure you are in the right directory, that is you should be inside your functions app. I am currently outside the functions app, that is my functions project. Let me just get into this functions app. Let me just see, we have all the necessary files like the function within the folder as well as this host.json package.json files. Now once you are happy, just we have to provide the functions app over here. So before publishing this functions app to the Azure, you need to make sure you already have created the functions app in the Azure. As you can see, I am already having one functions app created in the Azure portal. Now if I click on the functions section in this functions app, I don't have any functions. Now we are going to publish this HTTP trigger to this function app, that is BL testing 102. Click on enter. It is getting the site publishing info, then it will publish the functions app. Now let's wait for a couple of seconds until this application gets fully published to the Azure, then we'll resume this class. Once your local function app gets pushed to the Azure, that is to the BL testing 103 application, we can make use of this URL in order to invoke the functions. Now let's verify whether a function has been deployed or not. Let me just click on this functions and click on refresh. Here if you see, our function is successfully deployed with the help of the PowerShell in our computer. Now we can click on this and you can go to the code and you can just play around with the data. This is in a read-only mode because we have made use of the external tool in order to publish and build this function. But the code, you can always come to this code plus test and view the details. Now if you want to test, you can just click on this copy URL and paste it over here and it will give you the message. Similarly, if you want to provide the name, something like this, and test, it will give you the customized message like hello, the name what we have passed and the message. So like this, we can build the function app as well as the function within it with the help of the terminal locally, and we can publish the application to the Azure. In our next class, we will learn how to build, test and deploy the function to the Azure portal with the help of Visual Studio Code. In this class, we are going to learn how to develop the Azure function with the help of Visual Studio Code. I am here in the documentation page by Microsoft on how to develop the function with the help of VS Code. You can have a look at the prerequisite. First and the foremost thing is we need to have the Visual Studio Code installed on our computer. So you can make use of this download section under visualstudio.microsoft.com and you can install the Visual Studio 2022. With the help of this, you can only develop the C#, but if you use the Visual Studio Code, you can develop the function using all the supported languages in Azure. This is very lightweight and this comes with the extensions. With the help of extension, we can develop the function. If you want to just develop and deploy, we can make use of the extension, that is Azure Functions extension, which we will see how to install in our VS Code. And if you want to run and debug, then we need to install the Azure Functions core tool, which we had installed in our previous class. So you can refer our previous class on how to install this Azure Functions core tools. This is only if you want to run locally. Just if you want to create and deploy, you can go ahead with this only, the extension, that is Azure Function extension. Here Microsoft has provided each and every step which we need to follow in order to build the Functions app locally. Now we'll go ahead with our class and see how to build the Functions app with the help of VS Code. First of all, we have to create the workspace in which we will be creating our Functions code or the Functions app. And then we have to go to the extensions over here and search for Azure Functions. So this is the prerequisite. Before going ahead with development of the Functions app, we need to install the Azure Functions. So the publisher of this or the creator is Microsoft. Click on this install. This has been installed successfully. As soon as you install this, there will be a icon created over here with the name Azure. Click on this and we need to click on sign into Azure. So it will open up the prompt wherein we have to provide the details to sign in. Done. We have signed into our account. So it will show the active subscription over here. So one more thing is we need to make sure we have the active subscription for our account. Now here there are a number of things available. So we can make use of the Functions app in order to create a new function app over here. We can just click on this plus. We can select from the options create a Functions app. So if we click on this, it will ask the unique name. So I will provide the name as BL testing 104 and click on enter. It will ask the runtime. So as we are going to create the function with the help of JavaScript, I am selecting this Node.js 18 LTS. Then it will ask the region. I will select East US because I am creating all the resources in the East US region. So this will create a Functions app for you. So it will take some time in order to create the function, that is BL testing 104 in our case, and the function app will be created over here with the runtime environment as Node.js. We can verify from the Azure portal as well. Go to Functions app, just refresh. Our Functions app will be listed over here, that is BL testing 104. Currently we do not have any functions which are deployed to this application. We will create one. Now let me go back to this VS Code. Expand. We won't see any functions created as we don't have any. Now in order to create the function, we need to come to this workspace, click on plus new, and it will ask where you want to create the function. I will select folder as Azure Function. This is the local environment folder. Next it will ask what is the language I will be using. I will select JavaScript and I will select the model v3 over here. Next it will ask the template. I will select the HTTP trigger. It will ask for the name. I will keep it default. If we use anonymous as an authorization level, then anybody across the web can access this function. If we go for the function, we need the unique function key. If we select the admin, then we need a unique master key in order to access our function. For time being, I will select this anonymous. We will be creating a new project over here or the function for us. Now if we just expand this, we can see the function it has created, that is HTTP trigger one. With the code we can see over here, that is it will show the function.js. Function.json is the file which will hold the details for the trigger as well as the input binding as well as the output binding, as we had seen in our previous model. Now if we go to the workspace, here we can see in detail the functions file. As I told, functions.json file will hold all the details related to the trigger, input and output bindings. Coming to the index.js, this is the main file which will carry all the code for our function. So index.js file is the main file which will carry all the details for our code. Here if you see, our function is searching for the name in the query parameter or in the body. If it finds the name, then it will send back the customized message like hello and the name what we pass and the message. In case name is not sent, then it will send the message something like this, that is to pass the name. And sample.dat is the file in which we can provide the test data. So like this we can create a functions app locally. Suppose if you want to add the binding, you can just click on this and add the binding. It will ask in and out. So we'll add a few more bindings over here going ahead. In our next class, we will learn how to test and debug this function with the help of VS Code. In this class, we are going to learn how we can run or debug the functions which we have developed with the help of VS Code. So before starting ahead, we have to make sure we install this Azure Functions code tools in our local computer before going ahead with debugging the functions code locally. Now, in order to install that, we had seen in detail in our previous classes how to install the same with the help of npm command. So make sure you have the latest Node.js running on your computer. Then you have to use this command in order to install the Azure Functions core tool. At the time of recording this class, version 4 is the latest Azure Function core tools available. Once you have successfully installed, next is we can test or debug the functions locally with the help of VS Code. Let's see how to do that now. Go to the VS Code. Now, in order to test or debug the code, what we have to do is we have to go to this run and click on this start debugging. So if you have not previously installed the Azure core tools, it will prompt you to install. As you can see, it is running our functions in the 7071 port. As we had seen in our previous class, that 7071 will be the default port where the functions will run. Now, like any other debugger tool, VS Code will provide us the step in, step out and the step over functionalities over here, as well as we can disconnect from this debugger. Now we can make use of this URL and we can test our code. Let's use this browser and paste it over here. So as we didn't pass any name, it is saying a default message wherein it is asking us to pass the name in the query parameter. Let's now pass the name here. Let me provide the name as beenum. If you pass the name in the query parameter, it will send back the customized message. I have disconnected this debugger mode from here. Let me just go back to this Azure, click on the functions over here. Now, like any other debugger tool, we can add the breakpoint in our code. Now let me just open this index.json file and add the breakpoint over here. That is by clicking over here. Now what we will do is we will go to run and click on the start debugging. So it will start our functions app in the port 7071. So we can click on this run and debug. So it will open the variables and all. Now let me just trigger this function, copy this from here and paste it over here. Click on enter. Now let's go back to the VS Code. As we have added the breakpoint over here, it is showing the variables at each section. Let me just drag this over here. We had seen in our previous module, this context parameter will hold the details of the request, response, log and other details. You can have a look over here what and all details this context parameter will hold. What we will do is we will click on this step over and we'll execute our code. Now it has come over here in the next section. Now we can just step over to the last end. So we have completely executed this request. Now if you see in the browser, it is showing the generic message what we get. So like this, we can debug or run our functions code with the help of breakpoints and we can see what and all variable data it holds at every stage of line. Now let me just disconnect. In our next class, we will see how we can publish our functions app to Azure. In this class, we are going to deploy our function which is developed locally in VS Code to the Azure portal. First thing, you have to make sure we are signed into your Azure account in this Azure extension. Then you see the subscription which is active. In order to deploy, what you have to do is you have to click on this deploy button over here and select the deploy function app. Then we have to select the folder which we want to deploy. I am selecting this Azure function over here. Then it will ask which is the application we want to deploy. We have to select this application, that is BL testing 104. Then we will get the prompt. This will override any previous deployment and cannot be undone. Just click on this deploy. So you can see the progress of the deployment over here. So once all the checks are done, it will start deploying our BL testing 104 application to the Azure portal. Now let's verify over here and let me just refresh and see whether any application or function got deployed within this application. It's not done yet. Now we will get the message like deployment to BL testing 104 completed. Now let's verify from the portal. Now you can see that HTTP trigger 1 function got deployed from our local computer, that is VS Code, which was developed locally over here. Now if you click on this, you will get a message like your app is currently in read-only mode, because as we have developed this function with the help of VS Code, Azure won't allow you to modify this with the help of portal. Now if you want to see the code, you can just go to code plus test over here and you can view the details. Currently you cannot modify this code. As I told, this is only in the read-only mode. Suppose if you want to test this function, you can just copy this from here and open the browser and paste it over here, the URL. As you can see, we don't have any code over here as we had selected the authentication level as anonymous. Now if I pass the name like beenum, click on enter, it will give you the customized message. Now like this, we can create a function locally with the help of VS Code. We can debug, test and we can deploy the function right from the VS Code very easily. This will be useful for the developers who are used to working with the IDEs like the Visual Studio Code.